I'm Michael. Welcome to Beyond the Screenplay's What We're Watching, our podcast where we watch a limited television series week by week. Today we are talking about The White Lotus Season 3, Episode 7, titled Killer Instincts, available on HBO Max. I'm joined by the Beyond the Screenplay team, Trisha Rand.
Hello, everyone.
Brian Bittner.
Hello.
And Alex Calleros.
Hi.
All right, so we are continuing. We're almost there at the end of the season. Our experiment where we're watching The White Lotus week by week. We've enforced Trisha is not allowed to watch the previous seasons and give a fresh take on this anthology. And we're almost here at the end. We are careening toward the next episode, which is the finale. Here we are in the penultimate episode, which seemed to come out and announce itself as being about violence. Ever since this monk character was introduced, it's been a lot easier to identify the themes and the cohesion of each episode. And so there's this, it basically opens with this monologue of him sort of saying everyone has the capacity to kill. Buddhist scripture condemns violence in every form. Violence, aggression, anger all stem from fear. The only good faith response is to sit with your feelings. And violence does spiritual harm to the perpetrator and the victim. And so we kind of get that laid out as our framing device. And then cinematically, we have the Muay Thai fight getting intercut throughout the episode. So it's clearly introducing that symbol and those themes and making us kind of think about that throughout. And I want to talk about where we spotted those themes manifesting itself, because there were some that felt really clear. Like in this episode, Rick finally confronts the man he presumes killed his father and wants to do violence and tries to do violence to him in a literal way, but can't bring himself to kill the guy or even beat him up. He does tip him over in the chair, but ultimately it's not that bad given what could have happened. At the end of the episode, we do kind of see him when he's partying with Frank sitting with his feelings and maybe like processing things in a way. Guy Talk story where he goes on the date with Mook is very textually about violence, and she's disappointed that he's not more into violence and doesn't want a better job.
Mook, what is going on with you? What are you doing?
So there's that, and then Gary Gregg, is he going to do violence to Belinda, is sort of a tension thing, but he ultimately doesn't in this episode. So those are kind of the more literal on the nose discussions of violence, but I feel like there's deeper things happening here that I was having trouble kind of pulling the meaning from. So overall, this episode I was a little bit disappointed by, because it's like we're almost there, and it felt like the last episode had this nice explosive propulsion, and this one I don't even know. I'm not really sure what to feel about it. So I'm gonna start for the first time this season. Trisha, tell me what you think about this episode. Usually I pick on the others, but I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, my overall impression of this is just curiosity. I'm so interested in what the show actually is and is doing. I remain unable to find any comparable thing. I don't know what this is like. It's not like anything else. Narratively, it's doing some of the bathos that we've talked about before, where they build something up and up and up, and then that thing kind of just fizzles out or gets walked back. We talked last episode about Guy Talk just finds the gun. So Tim has the gun, then Guy Talk just gets it back without any confrontation, without any drama. Tim doesn't even know he has it back. Which, although now he's missing it, right? He realizes in this episode that he does not have it anymore. But yeah, that's an example. The meeting between, Rick and the person that he was there to harm or at least confront is kind of like that, where I'm expecting, we talked about maybe a big reveal that the guy is his father, or something recontextualizing the story that Rick had in his mind about what it was and that meeting was going to be. Even Sam Rockwell's character Frank seemed to think, oh, well, he brought the gun with him, maybe he is here to actually do some violence, and then he kind of doesn't. The show kind of just keeps undermining what it is. They set up this dramatic situation with the brothers, And then the brothers have not had to talk about it. They didn't see each other at all in this episode. So there's possibly a confrontation still forthcoming. But again, from a dramatic construction standpoint, this show is not interested in not even just conventional dramatic terms, but like any dramatic turns, really. It's such a slow burn that it's building and building and building, and then it keeps making left turns when you think it zigs when you think it's gonna zag. And that's cool. But yeah, I've been like, okay, well, Belinda, I was like, Belinda's bringing Zion to this party. Who is Zion gonna meet? Nobody.
The finale is 7 hours long, so we can wrap up a lot of this stuff.
I just like, I don't know. It's fascinating. Like, it's fascinating.
It is. Well, and there's a way to subvert expectations. Like, that can be fun, but the thing when you zig instead of zagging, zig needs to have a ton of meaning then. Like, it needs to be a better choice than going with the zag or reveal something like
which
more
maybe it will be.
meaning. Which maybe it will be, but it is just interesting that there's been so much zigging and it's been kind of unclear of like, where are we zigging to?
Yeah.
Rewatch Game of Thrones and try to care about a certain character for 8 years, knowing a certain thing that's going to happen at some point.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Brian, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, narrative blue balls, baby. We were like, I was just like, oh man, like from episode 5, and I was like, oh yeah, here we go. Now we're going. We're off to the races, and every episode felt like it was like one-upping the previous one, and this one was like, and not that I didn't enjoy the episode. It was just I was hoping this was going to be like, and then we went up another notch, and then we went up another notch for the finale, and instead it was just like, yeah, it's the setup and payoff thing that I think I was kind of noting, where it's like, we spend so long trying to get to Jim's house. And, I don't think Jim is done with. You don't cast Scott Glenn to like look at someone while they're talking and then fall backwards, And guy's got such a great voice. We need him to use it more. And then like, oh, we're going to this party at Gary Gregg's house, and da-da-da. And like Timothy's there. Is that what's that? Nothing. But then we have the incredible scene with Chloe talking to Saxon, right? Which is just like the best scene. It's just like, okay, we at least get that from the party. We at least get the Belinda, Gary Gregg, like confrontation, but it still felt like the party itself was built up to be like a big set piece or something, right? And then it wasn't. Even the Muay Thai fight was set up to be like a big set piece. And it's like, we're cutting to it throughout the episode, even before the characters are there, to be like, hey, look, violence, see what they're doing? God, get it. Yep. And then it's like the fight itself doesn't seem to be a big thing. So it's kind of like you were saying, Trisha.
Yeah, well, and even I was realizing as you're talking, Fabian's going to sing. He's going to sing, everybody.
That was the other thing. I was like, there's one more thing. I had my notes. I couldn't remember what it was. That was it.
What?
Right.
So yeah, a little frustration there. But at the same time, I'm very excited for next week, but also I'm like, it's that weird sinking feeling you get sometimes towards the end of a season where you're like, how are you going to wrap all this up in a satisfying way, right? And if I don't know how long the season finale is, I'm going to assume it's like an hour, but if it is an hour and a half or even longer, it's like, well, then why didn't you do those things that took up that extra time in previous episodes? Why wasn't it a shorter scene, et cetera, right? But anyway, I do think there's a lot to dig into here, a lot of just sort of general character study stuff. I think Lachlan's sexuality is sibling, I think, is just kind of what we're establishing now.
You're right.
And then
that scene.
Right. And then talking about things that were sort of stated out loud, I did think there was an interesting thing about characters just saying who they are or saying who they perceive the other one to be. So I think Saxon talking to his dad saying like, this is who I am, this is my entire identity, and it's it's dependent on your sort of status in the world, right? Laurie's frenemies telling her like, this is who you are, this is why you are the way you are, and you're kind of like, oh, I'm kind of on your side, Laurie, but at the same time I get what they're saying, and that's like not wrong. There's like a lot to kind of pick apart there. Mook saying to Guy Talk like, this is kind of what I expect from you, this is what a man should be, this is what I want in a part, whatever. I thought there was a lot of interesting things there where it was kind of the show giving itself permission for characters to just say what's on their mind in a way that didn't feel forced, but just felt like these characters are being pushed now to the point of that's all that's left, is to just like say things without subtext about themselves or each other. And I thought that was cool to see. And I'm just really interested to see what the end game is for all of these different groups of characters.
Yeah, I definitely want to come back to that, because I noted that also, like characters kind of saying out loud who they are, who each other is. And it's interesting because I think some of these storylines have earned that breaking point, and others, to me, it felt a little bit like a left turn in this episode. And so I think we can talk about when as a writer you've earned that self-revelation, self-awareness, textual, like verbalization of those things. Because I feel like, to me, this show has both of those things happening in this episode. Alex, what are your thoughts?
Very much agree with everything that's been said. I think there was something really interesting about this episode. We're talking about these big kind of revelatory climactic moments where people are just saying the thing out loud, and yet it seemed like such a not climactic episode. So you had the friends, Kate and Jacqueline and Lori finally really having it out, but it also didn't feel like anything had like really irreparably changed. I mean, they don't like each other anymore in a really like on the surface way, but it also didn't feel climactic. It kind of it ends with Jacqueline being like, I'm gonna go to bed now, and leaving Kate in the living room. But I don't know, and so it feels like this episode, like Brian, you identified something that I was feeling too, where it's like episodes 5 and 6 were just this ratcheting up, and I was hoping that it was going to be this kind of like nonstop acceleration towards the finale. And it was a weird juxtaposition in this episode of forward momentum and progress as far as characters, stating things and coming to terms with things, and even learning that Guy Talk kind of is this really devout Buddhist who really wants to embody nonviolence. That was interesting to like finally know about his character at the core of that character. So things are being stated plainly, and yet the momentum seemed to kind of fizzle out, and it just felt like, oh damn, like where's that energy I had the last 2 weeks? So yeah, it's interesting. It both felt like a move forward and also a step back at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is really interesting. And so since we're talking about this sort of the characters revealing things, to me the frenemies now of the three women, that did feel earned, because I think we've been tracking that their relationship as it ratchets and gets more pressure on it, and people are taking actions that are making people angry. Like I feel like it's been a very gradual building of tension between them. So it finally coming out here just kind of felt like, that's the next step that we've been kind of walking toward this whole time. Right. And that's fine. But also kind of didn't feel climactic for that reason. It didn't feel like an explosive, finally it's all come out. It's like, well, this is worse than last episode, but not that much worse kind of thing. But still, we got there. But like Saxon telling his dad, like, something's going on with you. I put all of my everything in your basket, and like, I don't have anything without this. That all felt a little bit unearned. Like, I didn't understand why this time and this moment, for sure, that this was why he needed to say this thing to his dad, was how I was feeling.
Yeah, I think I can read it a couple ways. I mean, I think there is a convenience to him saying that to his dad now, because his dad is fantasizing about all the different ways he's going to take his own life. And I think, Trisha, you called it.
His family.
Family annihilator.
Family annihilator. And this is a really interesting kind of insight into like the thought process and building of that family annihilator phenomenon. Very disturbing. But so yeah,
and again,
on the one hand,
clearly being explored there.
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. On the one hand, it's very convenient that he said exactly this to his dad, to give his dad this very almost like clear permission to now include Saxon in the annihilation plan. But I do think there was some setup, because I do think that Saxon, in his like kind of existential what the hell moment last episode, was confronted with Chelsea, who essentially just called him out to his face, like, you're soulless. I could never have a spiritual connection with you. And he seems to be kind of trying to prove her wrong in this episode and trying to pursue her and say, like, no, I can be a soulful person. I am a real boy. I'm a real person that, like, you maybe have a connection with. So yeah, I agree that it's convenient, but I do think that Saxon has been set up on this trajectory with Chelsea in an interesting way of, like, can I prove to you that I have a soul and that I'm more than just like this empty husk of an American? that all I am is my dad's business, and I really have nothing else about me that is interesting.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. To the point that you raised earlier, Brian, about like people just stating flat out, this is the kind of person I am, or this is the kind of person you are. In that scene with Saxon at the party, they're like, he's like, I'm not that kind of person that would do this like weird sex thing that Gregory wants you to do, me, like, whatever. And Chelsea goes, you are totally this kind of person, right?
Yeah.
Her argument is not about like why you should do this thing in this moment. This is the kind of person that you are, right? We mentioned before the theme in this series about who you appear to be, or like the you of the surface, essentially, and then like your inner you or your soul, in terms of identity, and how the show raises that question: are you inside who you seem to be outside? And so I can feel Saxon and the text of this episode grappling with that. Now, I don't know if the soul searching that he is doing feels a little bit, I don't know. Again, it feels like a little bit convenient, where it's like, well, he got involved in this threesome and rejected by this girl, and now he doesn't know anything about who he is, and so he's gonna meditate, I guess. I'm not so sure about like the through line there. And same thing with the connection with his dad. I don't think there's been a lot of work done other than like general identity crisis. Now Saxon's going to strike out in a new direction just because he doesn't like where he is. I think it's kind of in there. But where the episode ended with him, where he's like going to take the books from Chelsea and really try to read them, I guess now is interesting, and it's okay, but I do think I like how that storyline is evolving. Like, it does feel like we talk about stuff happening as, could this person go home the same person? I am confident now to say Saxon cannot go home the same person he was before he got to Thailand. So that in itself feels like something.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and it is interesting. When this show began, I was like, I don't like this guy. I'm not going to care about him at all. And that's not true. He's one of the more interesting like through lines, and I do find myself rooting for him to figure out his soul and his identity a little bit, which I like with that the show can make that twist happen for me inside my brain.
I think one of the biggest surprises for me about the show is how Lachlan has become the kind of like villain, or like creepy. Like I at first I was like, oh, this is a closeted gay boy like figuring out his feelings. It's awkward because his brother's naked, and that's like helping him realize. But like, there's something else here. Like, yeah. What is this?
Well, and so I love that scene at the temple where Piper and Lachlan are spending the night. Is the way it's shot is so great. There was a ton of great like filmmaking as always in The White Lotus, but there was something about just like his presence, the way it was shot, the context of like she's coming into his room, he's there, he's like shirtless, they're sitting on the bed. If you didn't know that they were brother and sister, it would feel like maybe a romantic setting with like the way the lighting's hitting and the warmness. And then his performance, there's just something like creepy, like in a dark way, and he calls that out about himself, right? That there's like a darkness in him that he doesn't want to like let out, and it's almost one of the most effective things I feel like this season is this weird like there's something going on with this kid, and it's just so subtle, but it's there the whole time. And now that it felt like a horror movie scene in a lot of ways of like, is this creature going to catch the victim here?
Well, it felt like that kind of thing you do when you're sort of like testing the waters with someone, whether romantically or otherwise, where you're like, anything I say is above board, but I'm saying it in just the right way that, like, depending on your response, I could be saying something else. And even the editing, there's this like genius wide shot where it's just like shot reverse shot, and then he says something like, I was thinking I could be here with you, and then it cuts to the wide shot of the two of them, and it's like they are on a bed. Here are two people, and it's just like even the editing is like look at this scene, right? And it just felt, it was really creepy and just in just the right way. And she's like, "Welp." Look at the time.
There's an interesting, Piper's reaction is everything.
Yeah.
Okay, bye. There's a really fascinating parallel, it feels like, happening, where at the beginning, when we first meet Lachlan, his parents are arguing about whether he's going to go to Duke or UNC, right? Which are rival schools. Mm-hmm. And his mom went to UNC, but his dad went to Duke. And so, like, everybody is, we see the Duke sweatshirt a lot on Tim's character. And then, they're like, his sister Piper's, I need you to come to dinner with me and mom and dad, or come to the temple with me. And Saxon is like, no, come out with me and these girls. And he's being pulled. It feels like his family is split down the middle, the men and the women. And he's being pulled in both directions by both generations in a fascinating way. And I don't know what it means. It's sort of that duality of just like, even, a shoulder angel and a demon, or just any kind of yin and yang, which Chelsea mentions in this episode. Like, she's like, it's like we're yin and yang and we're hope and fear. And it feels like Lachlan is embodying that.
Yeah.
What was so interesting about that bedroom scene at the monastery was just the way in which, it was both his performance just was unnerving, period. But it hit that perfect awkward sweet spot of Piper is doing this to get away from her family, to figure out who she is, and there's this almost this like act of like aggression upon her to be like, you don't get to do that, like I'm gonna come with you, you don't get to escape like this family. And so it's just like there is so much more than just, it wasn't just about Lachlan in a way. It was like he in his need to kind of attach himself to others, or whatever his thing is, which I'm still trying to figure out, he's kind of like just trampling and smothering all of her needs and desires. The whole point of this is for her to be by herself and to get away. And he doesn't seem to even like register that, which is part of the almost like this sociopath vibe of like, you don't seem to get it at all or care at all. Like, you're now almost like trying to manipulate her to just feel, bad enough for you to go along with this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Whereas earlier in the season, I feel like I would have chalked it up to, oh, he's just awkward and didn't mean it. There's something sinister in like this performance and this rendering of him in this episode, which is not entirely, but enough of that to make it unnerving in a new way.
And it was there also at the full moon party and in the aftermath as well. Like, just the way he's acting in these situations isn't innocent. Yeah, there's something going on.
Yeah. There was a lot of plot stuff moved forward, and not in like crazy reversal-y ways, but just, characters took actions that were sort of new actions. So Laurie, goes to the fight, ends up hooking up with one of Valentine's friends. I forget his name. And then there's that
Alexi,
yeah. And that like the fun post-coital scene where he's slowly and very not doing a great job of organically transitioning into this is a scam. Can you give me $10,000?
You could take Zelle.
Right. And like watching her face again, there's so many great reactions in this season, but watching her realize that aspect of it. Alexi's girlfriend shows up, she has to escape. We see her see like the jewelry and stuff that was stolen from the White Lotus. I didn't catch that on the first watch through, but so she's seen that he has all this stuff that was at the White Lotus. I don't know that she's going to put that together, But we do see Guy Talk put that together. And so Valentine and his friends were the burglars. Valentine distracted Guy Talk so they could get in. Guy Talk knows that now. And so what's he going to do? Who's he going to confront with that? He keeps getting put in these situations where he's going to have to like confront people and maybe be aggressive. Can he do it or not? Mook says you have to or else she won't love you. So let's see what happens there.
Do we think there's something deeper with Mook? Or is it just she just kind of has a simplistic view of masculinity and what real men are? Or is she manipulating for some reason?
I hope there's more. I mean, I don't necessarily like. I don't think she was being, like extremely reductive. Like I don't think she wasn't wrong about certain things, and that like violence is a part of life, and you do have to be strong at times and stuff. So like, it didn't feel to me like a regressive point of view entirely.
No, yeah. It did seem like a point of view that she could hold, and and was getting at a piece of the truth for sure.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting how strong she's coming on about it, and how it's like the single metric. And maybe that's just thematic and just is there to be part of this thematic discussion.
I mean, she's been very clear from the outset that she basically needs him to be in a better financial position if she's going to be with him, right?
Yeah.
And
that's
so
the
I
career
think
track
it's really
he's on.
that, right? If he's a security guard, then the promotion is going to involve violence, right? Or like at least a willingness to step forward and be strong in that way. And so I think it's really that is how I read it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like classic sort of friend zone stuff, right? Of just like, oh, I wish the guy who I felt like was my brother I was attracted to in that way or whatever. So it's like, well, if you did this and this and this, then maybe we could get to that point, right? And of course, the concern is that Guy Talk's going to have to make like a really drastic choice in the final episode to feel like he is doing that, right? So it's like, he's got all three of the guys tied up or held at gunpoint, and they are like totally fine and not going to hurt anything, and then he like shoots them anyway or something, right? I'm just kind of like I kind of just want like absolute chaos in the finale.
I'm hoping.
Just like multiple bodies from like different things, like Guy Talk kills Alexei, and then Lori like stabs him in the back or whatever. Jim shows up and has like a long monologue with Rick and Frank, and his wife brings them like drinks, and then they drink it, and then at the end it's like, oh, that was the poisoned fruit, so then they die as they realize like whatever his thing is. A monkey gets a gun for some reason. Gary Gregg like chases Belinda all over the place, but she gets on a boat and they just like watch each other, like nothing is resolved as they go. And then of course, just like whatever the craziest like sex thing you can imagine some number of the siblings ending up in, it's like twice as crazy as that. Like whatever we can think of, it's just like, no, you're not even started. So like I want all of those things. Let's check in next week.
I fully agree.
Oh, and then Timothy finds a gun and just starts shooting anyone, like just slowly walking around.
That was
shooting.
A lot of gunshots in the first episode.
It's a lot of gunshots.
There's a lot of gunshots.
Which I think gives basis to your monkey theory.
Right.
But I do think it's interesting. You guys have mentioned that season 1 of The White Lotus was kind of about money. Really thematically focused there. Here in this episode that is textually mostly about violence, there's also money being brought up, like quite a bit. And so there's the shakedown on Lori when she's in bed, by Alexei. But then there's the bribe offer, or like essentially the hush money that Belinda is being offered by Greg Gary. And I think that connection between money, we highlighted it in the last episode too, where she's like, she should be afraid of being poor, right? This is what money buys you. Chloe's interest in Gary Gregg is purely financial, right? Those things are enwrapped in this Western philosophy that's being pitted against Eastern philosophy. And I really like that Belinda is so offended by the offer of the money, right? She's like, okay, she realizes what's going on. And when she's talking to Zion about it later, she's like, it would be wrong. It's a wrong thing to do. She calls it out morally as being wrong. And Zion is like, you should do it, definitely. Not just because it's a lot of money, but also because if you don't take it, there will be violence, right? Like, if you accept the money, you live. If you don't accept the money, he will probably kill you. And me too, by the way, right? Now that I'm here. And so I definitely think that I don't know, I'm curious to see how the money pays out or plays out in the season finale, just because I think there's definitely going to be some money changing hands, or at least some talk of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that whole, the Greg Gary scene was interesting with Belinda. I thought it was really well written and well acted, of just like, this is I, Greg Gary, have come up with the most plausible, believable story I'm going to pitch you on. This is what I'm going through, and this is my experience. And here's $100,000 to like keep your mouth. Like, just how that was all done was really, really great. It was. I'm glad you brought up her son, because there were a couple weak character motivations that also bumped for me, and one of them was Belinda being terrified of Gary Greg, but being persuaded by her son, being like, let's just go and find out what he wants from you, and not let's get the hell out of here and like run for our lives. And like acquiescing to that felt like, well, okay, they need this confrontation to happen, so I guess she has to go to the party. Similarly with Victoria, I was like, she hates the boat people and she doesn't want to see them, but she's like, well, I got dressed, fine, we'll go to this party. So it's just a little bit of like contrivance and convenience, and it's all okay, but I'm really hoping that that's done now. And with this next episode, it's like, okay, you got all the pieces on the board where you wanted them, and now I just want to see the dominoes fall and characters taking actions that are the most true actions to themselves, and that's going to lead to the chaos, and that's going to create the meaning of the finale. And I'm a little worried, but that's what I'm hoping for this next
Speaking
episode.
of weak character motivations, it didn't take a lot of pressure to get Frank to have a drink, actually.
Yeah.
Like, he was talking about how he's like, actually being sober is not really the hard part. Being celibate is way harder. And so then when he gets tea at the house, I was like, okay, Frank's totally fine. He's fine. Everything's fine. And then literally she asks him like one sort of tricky question, and he's like, give me a drink right now. I was like, you didn't do nobody did any research.
There's no prep for this like con. Yeah.
Absolutely wild.
Not great con men is what it was. Like Rick forgot Frank's fake name at one point. Yeah.
I do also want to see a fake movie director's trilogy of movies.
The Notary.
The Notary.
Yeah, that was a trilogy.
Well, yeah, but it also just gave me the feeling of like Chekhov's Alcoholic, right? Where it's like, well, now Frank's going to do something unhinged because we know the minute he has a drink, he's going to totally lose his mind and something's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So violence could come from him too.
Right.
So many people that could do the violence. And there is this weird frustration I'm feeling of like a slight dissatisfaction that is leaving me in the place that you were describing, Brian, of just, and I want it all now. Like, I want all the violence, because almost it feels like there won't be enough meaning if it doesn't go that big. Like a simple, quiet, oh, that one person died doesn't feel like that's going to pay off the themes that are being discussed here. Isn't going to be enough to, I don't know. So that's what I feel.
And there's kind of a dread hanging over this season that feels to me stronger than at least the previous season. So it does feel like this dread has to go somewhere. It can't just be like a whoopsies accident death in the end. There's something darker going on here.
Yeah.
I hope so. I wrote a note at the end of this episode that said, damn, this show is really good at keeping anything from happening. And as we've discussed, that's not true, right? Like, things have moved, but it feels like where it's building to has to be explosive, because it's been such a gradual boil that it better like really boil over.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Timothy is a good example where it's like, I feel like I don't know, 4 out of 7 episodes have ended with him just being like, "Oh man, things are getting real bad for this guy." It's just like, what's going to happen next week, right? And then it's like, now we've seen him imagine like the worst possible thing. So it's like, what do you do with that? You either have him do those things, you have him do nothing, which can be effective, but almost feels like cheating to our monkey brains who want the big explosive finale, right? Or we have to go like totally crazy in some other direction, which is just like, so it's like, that's the frustrating thing. Sometimes is like when you suspect everything, then like nothing is satisfying, if that makes sense, because you're kind of like, the show is like, well, we already want you to suspect all of these things. So now what do we do with that in a way that's going to make us feel, and when I say satisfied, I don't mean like the good guys got the bad guy satisfying. I mean satisfying in a way that makes us feel like, yes, that was the correct completion of that story, of that thematic arc, whatever we were hoping for or not hoping for, but then that also is meaningful.
I think the best case scenario is that Mike White had episode 8 in his mind.
I had the exact same thought
from the beginning of this season.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that we're like annoyed by are like him contriving the chess pieces for this like thing that he actually wanted to make the whole time. That's my hope. That's the best case scenario. May not be what it actually is, but if that's what it is, then that'll be great.
Yeah.
And we forgot to talk about it this time, but I think next time is the time we need to talk about it anyway. The show that knows you're watching it.
Oh yes,
we must.
Yeah.
So after the finale, we'll discuss whether or not, or what that all means.
Yeah. So many things. Yeah.
I also wanted to shout out Chelsea's line, I'm hope, Rick is pain, and eventually one of us will win. Like I just
great
love
line.
her being like, I'm going to show up and like say some theme and then go take off to the next scene.
Yeah. Yeah. And there was plenty of shots of water drops rising up from the ocean and going into which now could also represent violence. We got like symbols on top of symbols and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Well, and so the next episode, the finale, is called Amor Fati, which translates to love of fate or love of one's fate. Which is interesting. I don't know what it means, but I like what it feels like in my brain when I think about it.
Fascinating.
Good.
Gives your brain good feelings.
Good brain feelings. Well, this has been our conversation about episode 7 of the White Lotus season 3. We want to say a big thank you, as always, to the patrons that make this show possible. Thank you to our producer, Vince Major. Thank you to our editor, Mike Worth, and the whole Nebula Studios team. I'm Michael Tucker, and I've been joined today by Trisha Arand, Brian Bittner, and Alex Calleros. And we will see you in the next episode for the finale of season 3, episode 8, Amor Fati.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.